Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're all well. Just on the channel Coop, or Cope, is the name of the shop in England, but we'll go with Coop. Adrenochrome, Immortality from Children's Blood is the name of the video. Very, very interesting. Seen it last night. 52 minutes long. Might not get through it all. Yeah, but we could recommend coming and watching the video on Coop, or the Cope, as we call it here in England. So, yeah, it's a bit of it's a dark one. It's a dark one. And kind of some sort of explanation as well as to what the Satanists are really up to as well. Why so many children go missing and vanish and where they go. It's not just about a child sex trafficking network. That is massively part of what's going on, as we've seen from the Epstein files, but then there's also a bit more to it as well. And adrenochrome, Immortality from Children's Blood, as the video is called. And adrenochrome is well, basically adrenaline in the blood. When you're scared, you produce adrenaline, which goes into the blood, and that adrenaline, adrenochrome, can have effects and can be harvested, and all sorts of darkness. To be honest, absolute darkness everywhere we look here. So yeah, I mean, this could explain as well, like child sacrifice and torture, as to why they do it as well. So there's some explanations in here as well, but it's very dark stuff, to be honest. So it's the fucking parental advisory here. So we'll have a listen to this. Yeah, it's a dark subject. We'll warn you now.
Like and subscribe. Now let's dive. I was and am not still quite sure how to start this topic in this video. There's so many places we have to go today, and I really don't think you guys are ready for this because I wasn't when I started this. This is a topic that has been covered up by so many lies and so much misinformation and slop media from every side that the truth is almost indistinguishable from fiction. But I do think that I have found the path through the proverbial forest, so let's see what we can find. First of all, because of the age we live in, there is one word you are not going to hear me say in this video, and it's the name of the topic for this video. So instead of saying, you know, that thing on the whiteboard, I'm going to refer to it by its laboratory name, C9H9NO3, or for our sake, C9 for short. I may on occasion refer to it as other things throughout this video in passing, but for the most part, I'm going to try and stick to C9 for continuity's sake. I want the chance for as many people as possible to see this because of how important it is to understand, so I shall be playing ball with the forced censorship of our age. That being said, we can officially dive. C9 is one of those substances that has many different stories being told about it, and it can be hard to know where to start with something like that. On the one hand, we have heard stated that the PDF file class is using it to extend their lives, and on the other, we've been told it's just a completely made up thing that your boomer uncle fell for on Facebook. You know, the one that worships Trump, not Biden. Now, we haven't covered nearly enough ground to make an argument for the first claim, but we are going to get there. As for C9 being fake, however, that is obviously untrue, as it is a genuine chemical compound known the world around. So then, if it's actually real, what is C9? At its simplest, C9 is a compound that the body produces, but I think this is going to be better to explain visually, so let's head to the whiteboard for this one. C9 is the resulting substance of the adrenal glands producing the hormone adrenaline, which is released in response to frightening, painful, or otherwise stressful situations. The amount of adrenaline and therefore C9 in one's body varies depending on the level of the situation. The more stressful, the more adrenaline, and therefore the more C9. I'm not going to try and bore you here and make it seem like you were in a high school chemistry class, but it is important to understand because this substance, many mainstream media pundits claim is just a conspiracy theory, is, like we said, very real. And intriguingly, despite being a medical substance, is reported as having essentially zero medical purposes and yet is still simultaneously mass-produced. The lab version, obviously, which seems odd, but hey, what do I know? Continuing, when talking about C9, people typically begin thinking of the PDF file class like we mentioned, and the harvesting of it for eternal youth, as well as some spiritual and psychedelic effects. It may sound a little ridiculous, maybe a lot ridiculous, but I would argue it's actually not that much. Indeed, C9 has been known to modern science for the better part of a century, but I think we can make an argument that its effects have unknowingly been known to man for centuries. Let's take the American Indian or Native American, whatever you prefer, I don't care. What I find intriguing about them is that they have a very unique history. One thing that frustrated me ad nauseum when I was in school was the noble savage myth, where the natives were all Pocahontas-esque and just desired to be left to their own devices, painting with all the colors of the wind. When in reality, no such thing could be further from the truth. The natives on this continent were very clever, strategically minded, territorial, and exceptionally violent. Obviously, there were many tribes, and that doesn't apply to all to the same degree, but as a whole, it's a fair description. Few were genuinely peace-loving, and war was basically constant. Among these tribes, however, there are several standout in terms of violence. And for our case, let's take, for instance, the Iroquois. They ruled a vast empire, estimated to be nearly 25 million acres in size, which is an unfathomable amount of land. But you're saying, probably right now, cool, whatever, dude, I don't care. What do the Iroquois have to do with C9? And as it turns out, quite a bit, because more impressive and in the darkest way possible was the ruthlessness with which the Iroquois maintained their lands and subsequently their power. Indeed, many tribes throughout the Iroquois Confederacy were known cannibals, extremely violent, devilishly inspired, and seeking something ethereal from their enemies. The Iroquois enjoyed cannibalism, which is already a bad look. However, they went beyond that, deciding that there was something more potent to the flesh and blood in the torture of their victims. Take, for instance, the case of missionary Brebeuf, a brother in Christ who sought to spread the light to a new continent, and had seen much success in doing so. He was a friend of the natives, and many of them had come to share the faith alongside him. However, other members of the Iroquois did not share an adoration for the Lord, and on the 16th of March of 1649, he was captured along with a man named Lamont, who was a Catholic priest. The two were tortured to the very bitter end, and warning, I am going to be reading an account from the Christian natives who witnessed the events that were imprisoned alongside him, and it's going to be horrifying. I mean that, you really, if there are kids here, they actually don't let them listen to this. I am going to reiterate once again about how serious I am. If I was a child and I heard this, I would have been horrified. A veritable account of the martyrdom and blessed death of Father Jean de Brebeuf and of Father Gabriel Le Allemand in New France in the country of the Hurons by the Iroquois enemies of the faith. The context is Father Jean de Brebeuf and Father Gabriel Le Allemand had set out from their cabin to go to a small village to preach the word to some Iroquois, and the village was named St. Ignace. The distance was less than a league away, but it was still enough for the following to take place. The following account comes from captured Christian natives who were imprisoned alongside the two Christian missionaries, and what they saw has been verified by other witnesses as well. In addition to that, the body was later recovered and it matched exactly what had been described. This is an account from the natives of that time. The Iroquois came to the number of 1,200 men, took our village, and seized Father Brebeuf and his companion and set fire to all the huts. They proceeded to vent their rage on those two fathers, for they took them both and stripped them entirely naked and fastened each to a post. They tied both of their hands together, they tore the nails from their fingers, they beat them with a shower of blows from cudgels on the shoulders, the loins, the belly, the legs, and the face, there being no part of their body which did not endure this torment. The savages told us further that although Father de Brebeuf was overwhelmed under the weight of these blows, he did not cease continually to speak of God and to encourage all the new Christians who were captives like himself to suffer well, in order to go in company with him to paradise. While the good father was encouraging these people, at this point there was an angry Iroquois who had heard the word and then turned away from it. He began taunting Father Brebeuf, pouring buckets of scalding hot water over him and making fun of baptism, and saying that he was helping him get to his eternal destination faster. After this, they continued the torture, creating a kind of like necklace of hatchets that went around Brebeuf's body, and they were also burning red hot so that if and whenever he moved, he was burned and sliced, but also if he didn't move, he was constantly burned by the hatchets. After that, they put him on a belt of bark full of pitch and resin and set fire to it, which roasted his whole body. During all these torments, Father endured like a rock, insensible to fire and flames, which astonished all the bloodthirsty wretches who tormented him. His zeal was so great that he preached continually. They continued to mock Father Brebeuf and his faith, but it evidently worked because the Iroquois Christians remained true to the very end. Those butchers then, seeing that the good father began to grow weak, made him sit down on the ground, and one of them, taking a knife, cut off the skin covering his skull. Another of those barbarians, seeing that the good father would soon die, made an opening in the upper part of his chest and tore out his heart, which he roasted and ate. Others came to drink his blood, still warm, which they drank with both hands, saying that Father de Brebeuf had been very courageous to endure so much pain as they had given him, and that by drinking his blood, they would become courageous like him. And I cannot lie, Brebeuf is a man of infinite courage. I can't speak highly enough of a guy like that.
I thought I would save the details because they were rather specific, but there is also a scene where the natives then fillet his legs and arms and eat that in front of him while he's still alive. We don't need to go into the detail though.
That of the consumption of his flesh, and most prominently, his blood. The natives admired how strong he was and wanted to consume him to gain his strength, making sure to execute him the moment he could no longer sustain life, so that he didn't die in weakness, but perish in his strength. And then these natives began two-hand gulping blood from the still warm body of Brebeuf. Indeed, we can understand this is not a one-off experience, but it is a custom in the culture, and it's understood that the power was greater in the blood of an individual who could withstand such torment. And at this moment, I want to strike back into the intro earlier that you may have just thought was me wasting your time. Do you recall when I stated that the more C9, indeed the more potent C9 is produced, the longer and more stress the individual is enduring? Well, I would have to imagine then that Brebeuf emitted some of the most, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, delicious and powerful C9 ever, as he lasted for literal hours under what I would describe as the worst kind of torture imaginable before relinquishing his soul to.
So, sorry to interrupt. So that guy there, a man of God, a man of Christ, tortured to death brutally, and endured to the end, a saint yet again. So again, 1600s, just after the time of the Millennium Reign, possibly we think. So yeah, torture to the end. But we heard this about the saints as well, that they were tortured and endured and didn't feel pain as such, and just preached the Bible, and while they were tortured and everything was all right. It was kind of the crack. A few times we heard that, you know what I mean, and a very very similar tale in a way. Nothing to do at all with the saints here or the Millennium Reign, this video, but it just kind of fits in there slightly as well. You know what I mean? Here again, we're hearing of a saint tortured to death brutally, absolutely brutally. And as you heard, just continued to the end and preached the gospel. And again, this was many times about the saints when they were captured, etc., that they were tortured and beheaded and all sorts of fucking mystical shit went on, to be honest. So anyhow, I just thought it was interesting if I kind of fitted into that, but while still having nothing to do with that at the same time. So, adrenochrome, as you're hearing, adrenaline in the blood. When you're tortured or you're scared, you produce adrenaline, so your blood has adrenochrome in it. It can be drank or, well, it can be harvested. Again, this is the I mean, it kind of was talked about in the Epstein files in a way, you know what I mean? Why I'm mentioning this, because this very much probably goes on in the background by the elite here, and probably explains where all these missing children go as well throughout the world. Yeah, so, and why there's the torture, and you know what I mean, the abuse, the ritual abuse and everything, because there's bigger games afoot, not just on the mind control level of like MK Ultra and compartmentalizing the mind, but also the adrenaline in the blood as well. There's all sorts of dark shit going on here, to be honest. So I just thought a very interesting video. I'll play a bit more. Yeah, I just thought I'd stop in and mention there the saint that was tortured to death and didn't care, and you know what I mean, endured to the end there, and all fitting in with the sort of saints cracks. And again, 1600s, not long after the time when everything was kind of got rid of as well. You know what I mean? All was all being covered up and murdered and brushed under the rug and. Yeah, but just an interesting tale, I thought. But anyhow, nothing to do with what we're talking about as such, the adrenochrome. Let's carry on.
the Lord. Obviously, I'm not making the argument that the wheelless natives were somehow aware of the existence of C9, but I am suggesting that what had remained unknown to, quote, modern science until the 20th century appears to have certainly not remained unknown to ancient customs. What they saw as the essence of a fervent servant of God that would empower them, we know as a hormone that generates unimaginable effects that we shall soon cover. It is also worth mentioning that the Aztecs share a similar ritual to the Iroquois. Those pyramids obese Americans ramble up thinking they look so pretty are simply altars built to ancient demons for whom the Aztecs fed with the blood of their people as well as slaves. Like Americans with football and carcinogenic foods, the Aztecs are known for ripping out the still beating hearts of victims and drinking the resulting blood. There's a little bit of argument here, but we do know that there was a drink given to these human sacrifice offerings prior to the sacrifice. It's believed it contained cocoa and blood, but I've seen a lot of argument going back and forth on this matter. Either way, though, we do know that there were a host of customs that the Aztecs enjoyed, which involved the consumption of human blood and the spilling of human blood. And mind you, like I said, these are just two native groups of dozens or hundreds that practice these sorts of horrific things. Something for you to mull over as we continue. That being said, the reference to C9 and its consumption and psychedelic effects cannot be overlooked. Its history can be tracked through the Middle Ages to ancient tales of vampiric beings, as well as very literal court proceedings. Like I said, I want this video to remain up, and we are already pushing the limits here. However, on screen now is an image associated with a specific incident where 6 children were slurped of their blood by a certain group of people. Feel free to go your merry way with that research, and if you know what you were looking for, there are indeed court proceedings covering this case. Hard to find the unbiased ones. There are more, and one specific one we'll touch on later, but for now, we're not there yet. I could yap for hours about the references to blood and C9 throughout history, but I think another time is probably best for that. Because reaching forward a few hundred years, C9 was basically unknown until the 1950s. It had been successfully synthesized in a lab somewhere in the later 1940s after incidences in World War II, where soldiers were given oxygenated blood when morphine was unavailable and began, for lack of a better term, to trip balls, which sparked later curiosity in the post-war period, and this patent would be granted for the laboratory production of C9 in 1952. If you're distrusting Fed, the receipts are on the screen right now. But to modern science, whatever that actually means, its depth of effect on the human body and mind would remain untraversed for some more time, until 3 funny fellows popped up in Canada of all places. These men were Abram Hoffer, Humphrey Fortescue Osmond, and the last and certainly not least, John Raymond Smithies, with a Y. All 3 of these men were doctors back when that still meant something, and had some interesting thoughts on that whole C9 thing. These gentlemen came to form a hypothesis, one that initially sounds bizarre, that there is a direct link between C9 and schizophrenia. Although as we shall see, it's likely not as strange as it may initially seem. The last 2 men mentioned, Dr. Osmond and Smithies, both worked at the Weyburn Mental Hospital in Saskatchewan, Canada. This place was horrifying, known for its lobotomies and insulin shock therapies, which is evidently when so much insulin is injected into someone that they go into a coma, a process which is often repeated for weeks. The more you know, as well as the casual, forceful injection of extreme doses of LSD into unwitting patients. But it was also unintentionally the tramping grounds for groundbreaking science, these 2 men's work. Being in such close proximity to schizophrenics and often treating them, they sought a solution to such a problem that had ruined the minds of so many. And in 1952, they released a paper where the 2 men discussed the molecular similarities between mescaline and C9. Mescaline being the psychedelic substance that is derived from a couple kinds of cactus. It's simple, but will take your brain far away from here. And the effects of mescaline, these researchers noticed, mirrors very closely the symptoms of schizophrenics. The 2 surmised that obviously the body wasn't producing mescal in such massive amounts as would be necessary and on a daily basis to cause schizophrenia, but they did know that schizophrenia and anxiety, as well as stress-induced states, had already been known and linked to one another. And so they presumed that perhaps something researchers had missed is how the body is breaking down adrenaline, the hormone connected to stressful situations, and maybe schizophrenics weren't processing that right at all. And so they uncovered, or more accurately, really paid the first serious attention to C9 and what it can do and how it affects the body, which caused them to write a paper that we already mentioned. It's actually super interesting and worth the read. You can find it below, but it doesn't compare to what happens when the researchers consumed raw C9 themselves and experienced something beyond bizarre. And this was just C9 that was made in a lab, not the OG stuff. For reference, this was Humphrey's 2nd time consuming C9. The first time was a smaller dose, this one was a larger one, and we'll begin there. This is from a book called The Witness, and it's discussing Humphrey Osmond's experience on the C9 substance, as witnessed to by several other doctors and several other observers. I had 5 milligrams of C9 this time because we thought that it was probably deteriorating. I saw only a few visual patterns with my eyes closed, and I had the feeling that there was something wonderful waiting to be seen, but somehow I couldn't see it. However, in the outside world, everything seemed sharper and the Van Gogh was 3-dimensional. I began to feel that I was losing touch with everything, and although I'm usually glad to hear her voice, I couldn't feel any warmth or happiness. I watched a group of patients dancing, and although I enjoy watching dancing and the envious interest of one who is clumsy on his feet, I didn't have a flicker of feeling. As we drove back to Abe's house, a pedestrian walked across the road in front of us. I thought we might run him down and watched with detached curiosity. I had no concern for the victim. We did not knock him down. I began to wonder whether I was a person anymore, and to think I might be a plant or stone as my feeling for these inanimate objects increased. My feeling for and my interest in humans diminished. I felt indifferent towards humans and had to curb myself from making unpleasant personal remarks about them. I had no inclination to say more or less than I observed. If I was asked if I liked a picture, I said what I felt and disregarded the owner's feelings. I did not wish to talk and found it more comfortable to gaze at the floor or a lamp. Time seemed to be of no importance. I slept well that night and awoke feeling lively, but although I had to attend a meeting that morning, I did not hurry myself. Eventually, I had to be more or less dragged out of the house by Abe. I had to get my car from the garage where it was being repaired. There was some trouble about finding it in the garage. When at last I was seated in the driver's seat, I realized that I couldn't drive it through traffic. Although quite able to do so usually, I did not, however, feel anxious or distressed by this, but persuaded the garage proprietor to drive me to my destination. I would, I believe, have normally found this a humiliating situation. I did not feel humiliated. I attended the scientific meeting, and during it, I wrote this note. Dear Abe, this dang stuff is still working. The odd thing is that stress brings it on after about 15 minutes. I have this glass wall, other side of the barrier feeling. It is fluctuant, almost intangible, but I know it is there. The stress was the minor one of getting the car. I have a feeling that I don't know anyone here, absurd but unpleasant, although also some slight ideas of references arising from my sensations of oddness. I've just begun to wonder if my hands are writing this. Crazy, of course. I fluctuated for the rest of the day. While being driven home by my psychologist colleague, Mr. B. Stefanuk, I discovered that I could not relate distance and time. I would see a vehicle far away on the long, straight prairie roads, but would be uncertain whether we might not be about to collide with it. We had coffee at a wayside halt, and here I became disturbed by the covert glances of a sinister-looking man. I could not be sure whether he was really doing this or not. I went out to look at 2 wrecked cars, which had been brought into a nearby garage. I became deeply preoccupied with them and the fate of their occupants. I could only tear myself away from them with an effort. I seemed in some way to be involved in them. Later in the day, when I reached home and the telephone rang, I took no notice of it and allowed it to ring itself out. Normally, no matter how tired I am, I respond to it. By the morning of 19/10/52, I felt that I was my usual self again. So yeah, this high lasted over 24 hours. This is one of the only descriptions of what the C9 substance is like, and obviously this was the lab-made stuff, not the real stuff or the stuff harvested from people. And what he describes is wild. He describes not feeling like he's human, not caring about other humans, contemplating possible killings of humans, and also a bizarre inability to feel embarrassment or guilt, a lack of emotion overall. I also do find it a curious note of that person he believed was watching him and he was paranoid about him. Who knows what that was about, but it is very odd. After this, new studies began popping up across the globe. For instance, in France, cats were injected into the brain with it, and they displayed some strange results, including falling into a sleep trance-like state, and at times the cats would jolt up and stare at random parts of the ceiling. It's also noted that these cats would then start contorting themselves into bizarre and uncomfortable and even painful positions, and then stay there frozen with eyes wide open, howling. Also important for the prevailing narrative, libido spikes wildly on this stuff. In one laboratory's large cat tried to make interspecies love to the researcher's dog. And many of these scientists had also tested the effects of mescaline and LSD on these animals and found that C9 had a longer lasting and deeper effect on the test subjects' brainwaves. And from these tests, these researchers came to a fascinating discovery. Our group of 3 men learned that the exact same symptoms are presented in C9 consumption as in schizophrenics. And literally all of the same symptoms are found. It's crazy. They create a whole chart with the severity. is worth looking at. It's on screen now, and documents are attached below. And from here, these men then went on to continue their studies in the field, finding what they believe to be the cure for schizophrenia, which they also have successfully used on hundreds of people. In one case, there was a patient that Humphrey is quoted, I believe it's Humphrey, as saying was originally completely schizophrenic and is now a high-level researcher in the medical field. So whatever they were doing was clearly working. And I'm not kidding about this thing. There's a ton of data on this. It's a whole long big deal and not the exact point of this video, but me saying this will probably make some go, you're lying, right? No, you can look it up. It really is out there. And I believe that it's been covered because it's not quite as large of a moneymaker as the current schizophrenic medication. But don't take my word for it. What's the phrase of the 2020s that everyone was quoting? Oh yeah, that's right. Trust the science. Today, however, the C9 studies stand as arguably the foremost example of the reality of this substance and how powerful it is for both good and bad, because Hoffner's work caught the attention of some three-letter organizations, specifically the CIA, who was playing tiddlywinks with mind control. And if you remember the sort of results that the C9 had on humans and animals, kind of sounds like people who are malleable to such things as mind control. For instance, the references to the cats being in a trance-like state. And I'm sure this is just a coincidence. I don't actually believe in those, but let's just say it's a coincidence that the foremost expert on the substance was then later directly involved with projects like MK Ultra. Oh. Nor should it seem even more suspicious than how the substance has been discredited in the ensuing years by establishment voices. I do, however, find it worth noting that Dr. Osmond was helping others down their psychedelic journey simultaneous to his work with the CIA, and I'm sure it's just a coincidence as well that Dr. Osmond guided Aldous Huxley in his Hollywood home on his groovy ride into oblivion 1 month after the CIA officially launched MK Ultra. Yeah, funny how that works. And from that experience, Aldous Huxley would go on to write an essay called The Doors of Perception about how great this all is and how we should all be taking psychedelics, specifically referencing the potency of C9. And if the name Aldous Huxley is ringing a bell for you, or however you pronounce his first name, it's because he wrote the eponymous novel Brave New World in 1932, well before this psychedelic journey. And Aldous Huxley's brother is certainly no one of note, except that he totally is, being the fellow that popularized and modernized the idea of transhumanism, the concept that all these tech lizard bros and boomers seem to worship. Great to know the CIA was up in all that from day one then. However, that is not where the literary and pop culture references to this substance end. Indeed, the roots go much further, and obviously, as you're watching this video, and I'm making it, haven't ceased to grow. For instance, let's look at the 1971 novel by Hunter S. Thompson, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Now, I'm not a film critic, thankfully, because that would suck, so I am going to simplify it for you. There are two dudes in Las Vegas. It's meant to be a metaphor for the pursuit of the American dream. One of
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. Brilliant film. Brilliant film if you haven't seen it. Johnny Depp. Yeah, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Mescaline and taking drugs and fucking yeah. This gets a mention in the film. So very interesting video here. I mean, we're 22 minutes in now. I'm not gonna play it all. There was a good interview with a guy. This guy here says a few good things. So I'll play a little bit more. I'll just play the end of this Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas bit. I'll maybe skip to Lado, but if you want to watch the video, come and watch it. But you kind of do, you know what I mean? He's done his research. You kind of getting the crack here, adrenaline in the blood. Yeah, we're getting all the history as well, and the science, and the people who the synthetic. You know what I mean? It's very, very detailed here. So very interesting, but again, it's 52 minutes long, and this video is long enough as it is. I don't want to steal the full video either. Just giving you kind of an idea of what's going on. But come and watch it. I'll play the end of this Fear and Loathing bit, then I'll play a lad here who gives a lot of a speech. But then come and watch the video on the channel. Yeah, as well, the effects of taking it, Lado described them, and again, kind of like sounded like being like on acid and in a trance and in a daze, and he had no empathy, and you know what I mean, and like, so again, this could explain if the elites are fucking harvesting this stuff. Again, a lack of empathy. They don't care about people. Well, there could be an explanation as to why as well somewhere in there.
One of them is a lawyer named Dr. Gonzo, based off the real-life figure Oscar Zeta Acosta, and Raoul Duke. Raoul is meant to represent Hunter S. Thompson, the author. They do copious amounts of substances of various kinds, getting higher than the Empire State, but their lovers are not waiting for them just to cross the bar. Instead, Dr. Gonzo gives Hunter's character a vial of red liquid. And if you had to guess what he calls it, what might you suspect? Yes, C9, but the real name. Worth mentioning, C9 was not very well known to anybody, even within the scientific community at this point, let alone the general public, and we know that Hunter S. Thompson was speaking in large part from experience, so just keep that in mind. Gonzo then goes on to describe how he came into possession of such a substance, and naturally we learn along with Hunter's character, it was given to Dr. Gonzo by a Satanist who couldn't afford to pay him. The Satanist told Dr. Gonzo that the substance in the bottle was extremely valuable, and far more potent than any other drug he had ever consumed, and that just a drop of it would make LSD seem like ginger beer. And by LSD, of course, I mean Lakeshore Drive, the road, which will take you up or down, one might say from rags on up to riches, but I digress. Because Hunter doesn't stop there with his writing, seemingly knowing something that would later become part of the pop culture narrative, he notifies us that the Satanist was also a known PDF file. Shocker, right? And the C9 presumably came from one of his victims. Ah, and there it is, saying the quiet part out loud, I dare say. Hunter's character, which is meant to be embodying, to a large extent, real experiences, like we've said, then takes a bunch of the C9 and begins his ride into a horror show, as Dr. Gonzo literally transforms into a Satan-esque figure. I don't know how many times I can say this, but Hunter was in large part speaking from actual experiences for this book. Just want to reiterate, that is important. He was so clearly an odd dude, but also he was rather based and had an admirable streak of distrusting the government. Unsurprisingly then, considering what Hunter obviously knew as far back as the 1970s, Hunter would be found deceased in 2005 in his Aspen home. Of course it was labeled a self-ending, but really, only a string bean stuck to the end of a kazoo could fall for all that hot air. It's one of the worst frame jobs I've ever seen, on par with Kurt Cobain and Vince Foster, and has all the usual patented government-done hallmarks, like active plans for things in the future deeply looked forward to, and family in the other room who would have heard such a loud pop as is said to have taken Hunter's life. But I do want to continue to note that this man, who seemed to display to some extent an intimate knowledge of C9 and where it comes from, also stated in an interview 2 years prior to his death, as well as many times personally thereafter and before, that he feared being taken out by the feds. Most prominently, a close compatriot of Hunter's named Paul William Roberts, who received a call the day before Hunter's demise from Hunter, where he was whispering, extremely frightened, that he had uncovered hard evidence that the government was involved in the staging of the events that occurred the week after September the 4th. I mean...
Sorry, just stop it there. A week before his death, he rang his friend and he said he had good evidence that the government may have been involved in 9/11. Right. Yeah. We have good evidence of that. Again, there's a lot of things. I've never really covered the 9/11 thing, to be honest, because it's that long ago. And again, it's the kind of thing most people know at this point, but there's lots of events that happened on 9/11 that Osama bin Laden couldn't do, for a start. Well, I'll put it there. Osama bin Laden couldn't do. Yeah, I mean, I've been through some things. Again, you're not allowed to really talk about it, to be honest. That's why I don't, because I made that video about the Pentagon and there being no plane. And it got removed because you're going against the narrative that they've tried to sell us for 25 years. So, very interesting there as well. Again, you heard it yourself. Again, saying you believe the government may have been involved in 9/11. Yeah, they very much were. They absolutely were there. So he was bang on there again. Again, apparently murdered. Took his own. Another one who's committed suicide. One of these rich people with all the money in the world who's fucking killed themselves for some reason. I mean, what hope do we have? You know what I mean? We got fuck all. So yeah, again, apparent suicide. Another one here. A man who just so happened to not be on board with the government and the agendas here. So a very big mate of Johnny Depp fired his ashes into the fucking stratosphere there in a rocket or something. So yeah, very interesting. Play a bit more then.
I mean, if I were a betting man, then let's just say my shekels aren't on the prevailing narrative that Hunter did it himself. And it's pretty convenient that Hunter had a broken leg at the time, making it difficult for him to fight back.
I had a broken leg at the time and it's difficult to fight back. I was going to read this a moment. Hunter telephoned me on February the 19th, the night before his death. He sounded scared. He wasn't always easy to understand. it wasn't always easy to understand what he said, particularly over the phone. He mumbled. Yet when he was when there was something he really wanted you to understand, you did. He'd been working on a story about the World Trade Center attacks and had stumbled across what he felt was hard evidence showing the towers had been brought down not by aeroplanes that flew into them, but by explosive charges set off in their foundations. Now he thought someone was out to stop him publishing it. They're going to make it look like suicide, he said. I know how these bastards think. Yeah. That's absolutely how these bastards think. Yeah, they've got a heart attack gun there. We've seen since the 70s. All sorts. So, yeah, they will murder you if you go against the agenda and try and expose it. So, explosions in the foundations, very much so. I mean, the people were hearing explosions for fucking hours after the planes had hit the buildings, and it all came down real fast in the speed of gravity there. I think 9.8 seconds for the entire tower to collapse to the floor, which is the speed of gravity with zero resistance. Again, a building falling down from structural failure will have some form of resistance, but this had no resistance and fell down at the speed of gravity. So, yeah, there was explosions and thermite, and they took the beams out, and it collapsed in on itself. That's why it didn't fall over and pretty much land on all the other buildings of New York there. There was minimal damage to the majority of the other buildings. Considering what had happened, you know what I mean? Considering what happened, there was minimal damage to surrounding buildings not within the World Trade Center complex, really. So, I mean, I very much believe this, to be honest, that he was probably murdered. Again, the whole lie of the 9/11 still rides today, doesn't it? 25 years down the line, a quarter of a century. And for the vast majority of the world, the 9/11 lie still flies today. Well, I say the mass majority of the world, but it probably isn't, to be honest. Just the fucking zombies in the Western world. Everybody in the Middle East probably knows it was a lot of bollocks. So, again, just found that very, very interesting as well. Good video, a lot of information in here. I wish we read a bit more. Football season is over. No more games, no more bombs, no more walking, no more fun, no more swimming. 70, what's this about? I don't know what that is. Football season is over. This one, I don't know what that is. You're getting greedy. Act your age. Relax. This won't hurt. But it was written 4 days before his death, according to family and police. So, I don't know. I've never looked into that, to be honest. I didn't know he killed himself. I didn't know much about it. I knew who he was. I knew Fever and Love in Las Vegas. I knew it was Johnny Depp's mate, but I never really looked into it or anything. So there you go. There's another conspiracy theory, possibly, that Hunter S. Thompson was murdered for knowing 9/11 was an inside job. Yeah, so I'll play a little bit more. So we'll get to the end of this, and just play this guy.
Events that occurred the week after September the 4th. I mean, if I were a betting man, then let's just say my shekels aren't on the prevailing narrative that Hunter did it himself. And it's pretty convenient that Hunter had a broken leg at the time, making it difficult for him to fight back. And most comical to me is that despite the media lying and saying the opposite for the first few days, Hunter S. Thompson, the prolific author, synonymous for many with the written word itself, despite being at his typewriter, didn't bother to leave a letter. In fact, there was a blank page in the typewriter, and all it said was the word counselor. So yeah, put that C9 in your pipe and smoke it. Thus, it's fair to say that Hunter is simply a man who knew far too much for a certain group to leave him alive. But as we know, this isn't a story about Hunter S. Thompson, but it does seem that those who know, you know? Like Anthony Burgess, a man whose seminal work, A Clockwork Orange, was published on March 17th of 1962, and it also contains references to what is presumably C9. The world of Clockwork Orange is disturbing, drug-filled, and debaucherous, so basically the exact same as today. Importantly though, the novel contains a scene where a few of the characters pull up to the Korova Milk Bar, which is an establishment that can't sell liquor because it doesn't possess a liquor license. So it sells other creative or special drinks, you might say. And I also want to note that the entire book A Clockwork Orange is filled with its own slang and unique language, which is made up and yet somehow rather humorously, despite how old it is, sounds eerily similar to today's brain rot. But digressing, Anthony named the language Nadsat, so him leaving out some letters or changing spellings of words is not at all uncommon. Well, what they sold there was milk plus something else. They had no license for selling liquor, but there was no law yet against prodding some of the new veshies, which they used to put into the old Moloko. So you compete it with the Velocet, or Synthesmic, or Drencrom, or one of the other veshies, which would give you a nice, quiet horse show, 15 minutes admiring Bog and all his holy angels and saints in your left shoe, with lights bursting all over your mozg. Or you could peat milk with knives in it, as we used to say, and these would sharpen you up and make you ready for a bit of dirty 20 to 1. And that was what we were repeating this evening. I'm starting off the story with. Bog is slang for God, and the description of the trip that Drencrom takes you on is indeed very similar to that which is described so long ago by the initial researchers of C9 like Osmond. Seriously, if you read his other stuff, it gets even crazier and more like what this Drencrom drink is described as being. It should be stated though that this is not the only reference to C9 in A Clockwork Orange, as it makes its way into the book at minimum 3 other times, as well as in Stanley Kubrick's film on the subject. Furthermore, there are indeed other references in odd places, like the rock band Sisters of Mercy, who published a bizarre song named You Know What on the matter in the early 1980s. This is
Boom, adrenochrome. So I've played kind of half the video here, maybe slightly over. Come to the channel to watch the rest of it. Again, very, very interesting subject here, as you can tell. I'll just play this guy. This is the man here. Would you believe it? A fucking advert. So, I believe this is the man who played Jesus Christ in The Passion of the Christ, Mel Gibson there. So, another connection, weirdly, back to Christ here. So, just we'll listen to this guy, then I'll leave it there. Come and watch the video on the channel.
known for some major roles, including his role as Jesus Christ in The Passion of the Christ and The Count of Monte Cristo. He went on the record as stating that he knows children were being trafficked and tortured for the sake of harvesting C9. Here's the clip for you.
Especially our country, because they're pulling kids out of the darkest recesses of hell right now, in dumps and all kinds of places. The children, look, where we're at right now. Hopefully, we need your prayers. Essentially, you have adrenaline in your body. I'll just simplify it. And when you are scared, you produce adrenaline. If you're an athlete, you get in the fourth quarter, you have adrenaline that comes out of you. If a child knows he's going to die, his body will secrete this adrenaline, and they have a lot of terms that they use. It's the worst horror I've ever seen, is screaming alone, even if I never, ever saw it. It's beyond, and these people that do it, there'll be no mercy for them. A lot of people that are involved in it all over the world that are in this. And many of these people are very famous.
This statement was made during a promotional interview he was doing in 2020.
Yeah, these people are very famous. Again, he was talking about God there as well. There'll be no mercy. There'll be no mercy when the curtains draw close here. These people and what they've been up to. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing as well. Like all this, it will all be sorted out in the end, right? You might not believe that now, but all this will be sorted out in the end. And these people, these Satanists, these fucking dark, fucking demonic people, well, yeah, they're going to Avicii there that we learned yesterday, the worst, the bottom level of hell, to swim in the lakes of fire there. It would seem. So, fuck them, you know what I mean? Fuck them. It'll all be alright in the end, but it just really isn't alright on this planet, and really hasn't kind of ever been, to be honest. I mean, the 90s were good, you know what I mean? We had the 90s. In all of history, we had the 90s. So, I'm going to leave it there. Very interesting video, very interesting subject. Adrenochrome, adrenaline in the blood, children, hundreds of thousands of children go missing off the face of the earth, in Britain alone. Every year, people just vanish. Why? Epstein, dark fucking satanic paedophile networks. Up to a lot more than paedophilia, it would seem. Again, real dark shit going down here. Again, harvesting blood, possibly even fucking um, producing babies. Again, Epstein there trying to have kids with people. Again, all sorts of darkness, to be honest. Absolute darkness, the likes of which you've never seen. But you need to shine a light on it to sort shit out in a way, you know what I mean? But as I say, it'll be sorted out in the end anyhow. But still, like, these people get away with literal murder and child. Yeah, honestly, like the worst things you can possibly imagine. These rich people get up to, and again, the Epstein files very much alludes to it all. You know what I mean? So I just thought it very interesting, and I give it a mention because something I'd never mentioned before, and again, kind of an explanation as to as to what these elites are up to with children. It's slightly deeper than just paedophilia. The paedophilia is maybe part of the fear to induce the adrenaline in the blood. So again, the abuse, you know what I mean. So very very dark stuff. Again, come over to the Coop, very popular shop here in the UK, or Coop, and listen to and watch the rest of the video. Again, I only played half. A lot more information, as you say. There was a lot of information in that first half, and he'd done his research there. So I'll leave it there anyhow. Peace.